Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez. And for today's episode, I really wanted to dive into persecution delusion. It was very alive and strong during my years in the group. I don't think it was that strong in the beginning. However, as time progressed, I could really see this stronghold, this strong idea of persecution, of the bishops after us, of everyone is out to destroy us, of Freemasons trying to bring us down. And I wanted to approach this in a way to reach the audience, those who were in the same group that I was in. So I'll be using a lot of Catholic terminology, and I'll be really actually using canon law. And I believe strongly that if canon law were used appropriately, if it were used at all, then many of these abuses and delusions could have very easily been avoided. But with that being said, I just wanted to set the mood that this episode is going to be diving into canon law. We'll be looking at uh, the laws from 607 to 628 pretty much. So if you have a canon law book, or if you have access to the internet, which I'm pretty sure you do, you can go ahead and check those out and follow along. One of the things that I really remember from this group that I was in was having this feeling that anyone who was with Father Bing, anyone who was in this group was special. I remember even before when I was contemplating joining, or even when I was in, I think it was like my first year during my, we would call it postulancy. I remember being told, "Wow, Ryan, look, you joined us, and if you stay, you're gonna be the first Salvadorian priest in this special community, in this group movement chosen by God to bring salvation of souls." And I was thinking, wow, all right, that sounds pretty good. And I felt very special. I felt really especially chosen by God to have this mission. And I remember other people, other members being told, um, for example, I'm gonna make up a name. Uh, Tommy, look, wow, you're gonna be the first European or the first Caucasian member to become a priest of this group. Wow, how special you are to be here. And so they really, I guess you can call it love bombing, where you love bombing is a term used when they make the member, especially in the beginning, to feel very special. So that's something which I really felt early on. It didn't last that long, but it felt nice knowing that, wow, I'm going to be the first Salvadorian, and I don't know, I'm just here for the ride. So I joined, and something that I saw throughout the years was a strong us versus them vision. And I mentioned how I've already tried to establish how they made us, or at least me personally, how they made me feel that this group was totally special. Was that I was in this mission created and chosen by God. And I'm like, wow, I have this privilege. I have this, I guess, like, I feel above. But then they made this us versus them mentality. So they would mention about how um, the seminarians from other groups from another diocese, they would tell us, well, look at them. They don't fast like we do. They don't pray as much as we do. They don't speak Latin. They don't do Latin mass. They gorge themselves. They're gluttonous. Some of them might even be dating. Some of those priests and bishops are abusive, probably most of them. And so that really created this stronger us versus them mentality. And I wanted to, be real. I do believe that there are some bishops who might be, um, well, we see the newspapers. They're not no angels. And sadly, sometimes there are good priests who do get silenced or punished when, in fact, perhaps these priests should be more treated with honor, for standing up. But putting that aside, because yes, we know that those things do happen, but I'm trying to focus once again on the movement that I was in. So they would use examples of, bad priests, bad bishops from other groups to show that this group that we were in stands out and that it is special, and that if there are bishops who are going against some priests, then most likely uh, bishops will be going against us. And so really they've created this strong us versus them mentality, but inside my interior struggle was, okay, as a Catholic, like how do I process this? Because there are, I'm Catholic, but then it's like we're creating this new church which is separated, but we're trying to stay, as they would say in the group, we need to be incognito so we don't get caught. So this term was really used and was really confusing for me, because in my mind I'm thinking, are we Catholic? Are we really in line with the bishops and the church? Because it looks like we're, having this strong division, but we had to be quiet about it. And so I wanted to bring my frustrations, my confusion, and as I do this podcast, I imagine myself talking with the younger me, the me who had a lot of questions which couldn't be answered, questions which, if I asked them, it would come off as being rebellious. So from this moment, I'm going to be giving some more examples, but also, like I said, we're going to be diving into canon law. So I'm going to be talking about the erection and the suppression of a religious house in a diocese. And in in order for a bishop to allow a religious institute to establish a house, or as they say in canon law, to erect a house, there has to first be written permission, written consent that the bishop is going to allow this establishment to be on, pretty much on his property, on his diocese. So, like Father Bing, he isn't a bishop, but first he is the founder. And in order to, from this is from my understanding of canon law, in order for him to to erect a house, there has to be permission of the bishop. And so he gets his permission, and then our communities started to grow. So we had a community in Dover, Delaware. We had a community in Nebraska. We had a community also in San Jose, Philippines. And that was, of course, with the written permission. But I also wanted to get into the suppression of a community where the bishop has the right to take that back, to take back that permission. But before he gives that consent for a community to be there, the bishop also has, I guess, he has rights and duties himself. And one of the things that a bishop needs to have in mind is that, when this religious house institute is established here, are the members going to be able to live out their constitutions, live out their religious life? And that's very important, because in Nueva Ecija, that's in the Philippines, in San Jose, I remember we were told that the bishop was actually trying to get us to stop living the life according to our constitutions. Now, I don't know the truth. I don't know what was happening there, because it was only one person telling us the story, the superior in that location at that time. So I don't know what was really going on. But also in canon law, it says that, like, for monasteries, and I believe it's around uh, 611 or around 616 of the canon law, um, that monasteries, like where the nuns and where the monks live, that only the Holy See, which is the Vatican, can suppress a house. So what happened there in Nueva Ecija was that I remember in the middle of the night during my novitiate, we were told to get up, pack our bags, and in 5 minutes we're gonna leave, or maybe 10 minutes. But it doesn't matter how much time they gave us. What happened was just that in the middle of the night, you pack and you leave, and we're on a bus, and we don't have that many belongings, just a few shirts, socks, a couple slippers. If no one stole your slippers, I mean, we had very little belongings. And so it was very easy to just pack up and go. And then we were in another location, and that was Laguna, Philippines. And from what we know, yes, we did have permission to be there in Laguna. But they really brought this idea that what's happening is a strong persecution, because, like I mentioned before, how they would use examples of some bishops being uh not good people, and they would use those examples of, if anything happens, it's because they're bad, and we need to be incognito. We need to hide our members. We need to protect our members, because we're the special group. That's the vision. That's the mentality, and we all embraced it, or at least I, like, full on embraced it. I'm like, man, these priests and these bishops, and they would tell us that. Uh, I remember there was someone said, I don't remember who, but that there were spies of the priest and of the diocese in Nueva Ecija, and they were looking at our compound, taking pictures, and being spies. So there was this strong amount of fear that these priests are probably communists, or that they're Freemasons, or that they are with the Illuminati, and that they're really out to get us. And so we were in Laguna now. We just got, I'm not sure if we got kicked out, or if, because I mean, I never saw a letter of the bishop saying you're no longer allowed here, but I just remembered we were in Nueva Ecija, and the issue was that the bishop was trying to get our community to break our constitutions, which I find to be, I mean, now that I'm out, I find that to be very unlikely. But I want to give you another example, and this was in Alabama. And I remember we were doing a an event, and we had to wake up at 1 in the morning. We had to join Father Bing for mass and for prayers, and then he even did exorcism. I think that was like the first time we did exorcism. I believe he did. He might have done the solemn exorcism or the Pope Leo the 13th. I don't know, but I remember the prayer was just so long. But I remember before he started doing this exorcism or long deliverance prayer, he was saying to the members, I need to especially do this deliverance or exorcism for the California members, because the bishop there, the cardinal there, he's cursing you. He's cursing this place. All the members from LA, they're cursed. And I'm thinking, my God, really? I'm getting cursed for what? I mean, he doesn't even know me. And so, but that really fills the mind. I just turned 17, and that really filled my mind with this fear that, oh my gosh, I'm being cursed by a freaking bishop or cardinal, and I need to stay close to this group. I mean, it really brought this fear, because in my first year there were times when I wanted to leave because I felt that this isn't really what I signed up for, but they tell me I got to obey, so whatever. And then now it's like, wow, I'm getting cursed and I'm getting hexed and I'm getting demons sent my way. Wow. All right, so I'm going to really stay latched to this community. So so I want to give you a bit of an understanding of how it is that I felt, and perhaps many members felt at the time. And it could be that there are some supporters who really have this fear and this paranoia. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, these bishops, they're bad. They're out to get us. And, it's like, okay, for a moment, let's just put our emotions on the side just for a moment. I'm not saying rejecting our emotions, because it's a lot of emotions is really in this topic. Because at that time, thinking, man, this bishop is cursing me, and you're telling me that I gotta, play by the rules. Like that doesn't sound right. Well, I mean, let's take a break and from the emotional side, and let's look at the canon legal law side, I guess I could say. Because one thing that Father Bing would always say is that the devil is legalistic. And so, I mean, it's kind of awkward that he would say that so much, that the devil like counts all your sins and he knows all you do, and he's counting everything. And yet when it comes to the legalities of the Catholic Church, which he claims to, be a faithful servant to, you really see that there are a lot of rules being bent. And I'm not bringing this up to downplay Father Bing. I bet he has great intentions. However, I do want to see uh, transparency in the Catholic Church. I do want to see that uh, there's no more abuse or twisting things and getting people all confused. And Father Bing, he's also supposed to be a faithful servant. He's not above the laws. I mean, he's telling us you have to be faithful to the laws, you have to obey everything. And then you see these, twists and turns of canon law, and then it's like, going back to my last episode on how they would say, well, the salvation of souls is the highest law. So even though we're, going against these bishops, they're persecuting us, and the highest law is the salvation of souls. So we're good to go. All right, let's go. So I'm hoping that this episode is really going to open a few minds on just my personal perspective, and that you can see my confusion at that time. So going back, I believe it was Canon 616 on the suppression of communities of religious houses. When it came to the monks and the nuns, I mentioned that only the Vatican, only the Holy See has the right to suppress it. So it can't be the bishop. It has to come from the Vatican. And they told us this. And they told us that, hey, in San Jose, we're all going to leave. We're not allowed there anymore. The bishops are persecuting us. They don't want us. They're trying to get spies. But there's a loophole around it. And I was like, well, what's the loophole? And the loophole is that they can't remove the monks and the nuns. It's like, okay, so where are you going with this? Well, we have to be incognito and we have to continue our missions for the salvation of souls. So you're going to be dressing up like monks. And so they would they would give us hoods, and every time, like, we were either we were inside the building 24/7 like a prison, or like when we walk outside we'd have to have our hoods on to make us look like religious monks. And looking back, it really does sound very culty. But in canon law, this is also one of the things of the bishop, is that before signing the consent for the permission, he's going to have to know that the this religious group is going to be able to live out their constitutions and live out their works proper to their constitutions. And this is actually something that bothered me, years later. At that time, I was just so, uh I guess you can say, brainwashed. I hate using the term brainwashed because it makes me feel like a big dupe, like a sucker, but let's just use that word. I felt so brainwashed years later, uh, because I was thinking, how come we had to do these things? I mean, I didn't. One of the things why I wanted to leave in 2012 was because I was noticing that we were doing things that I didn't sign up for. And so I'm thinking, well, I mean, now that I'm starting to understand canon law a little bit better, and my rights as a religious member, is like, I the bishop did have a right to want to remove us. Hello, everyone. Ryan Anthony Hernandez here. And if you enjoy listening to the Truth That Heals podcast, and if you've seen all of the work that I put in and you would like to support, I do have a Patreon. It's not a lit page just yet, but I'm working very hard to hopefully make it a much more exciting Patreon. However, if you would like to assist me to help all the work that I do, you can check out my Patreon. And if you would like to be a member, that would help me out so much, because there are a lot of hours that I put in doing the research, in doing the recordings. It's a lot of work and I don't really get paid for this. But if you would like to help, I do have a Patreon, and that is, which you can check out, is www.patreon.com/truth that heals podcast. Again, that's patreon.com/truth that heals podcast. All of your assistance, contributions really helps me out in paying gas and paying bills and being able to pay for the Zoom membership. It's a lot of things that I'm doing, and your assistance really helps me to keep going forward. So thank you very much and have a good day. I wanted to go back now to the fact that we were twisting canon law, because I said that in canon law, the one who has the right to suppress a a monastery isn't the diocesan bishop, but it's actually the Holy See. And so they would use that as a loophole for us to go back to Nueva Ecija and to dress up as monks. So we had these hoods, and uh, I remember having this fear, because they would tell us that these priests from the diocese, that they're going by our compound to take pictures and to spy on us. And so I remember having my hood and having my head down, and it's super hot, so I'm mad sweaty, and I'm walking on the compound, in the compound, with my head down, hood on. But then we would go to our house or prison, and it was just I don't know how to explain it, because we all had this like idea that we were being watched, and that the rest of the church was out to get us. So yes, so this is now I'm kind of thinking out loud. So yes, I joined to be a Catholic religious, and maybe even the priest. First of all, I just wanted to really do good things and maybe some missionary work. But then I started seeing this activity, and at the moment I didn't think much of it, because I my way of thinking was that this is God's chosen group, and that everyone else, every bishop and every priest is part of the Freemason, and if they say anything about us, then they're actually just persecuting us, and they're agents of Satan. That's pretty much what I thought, because I mean, going back to that trip in Alabama, when we had to wake up early and join Father Bing for morning prayers, and that was my first time, I believe, joining Father Bing for morning prayers, and hearing him share that the Bishop of California was cursing me, and that I really needed this exorcism. It's like, okay, I'm buying into all this. This is all juicy to me. It's like, wow, so outside, every bishop and priest is going to be evil, and I'm not saying that there aren't evil priests or evil bishops. Absolutely, there are some terrible priests and bishops. But the way that this Father Being made us feel was that with him is the only way of having protection, and that only with him you're actually being a real Catholic. That's how I felt. But as I started getting older, my I guess you could say my spidey senses started coming into play a bit more. And then I want to get into now um Canon Law 628, section 2, because now this part is talking about the right a bishop has to visit a community. So for this next portion that I'm going to be talking about in this podcast, we'll be looking at Canon Law 628, sections 2 and 3, and this is regarding visitation, where the bishop has the right to visit a community, especially in his diocese. But in particular, in the group that I was in, we had this thing called the I think it's called apostolic visitation. I don't remember the exact terms. I mean, it's been a while, but that's when the Vatican, not the bishop of the diocese, but the Vatican sends a delegate or delegates to come and visit. Now, before this even happened, I remember being told that like we were pretty much given a warning or like a heads up that, hey, there might be visitations, and what they might be doing is they might be setting up spies to watch on how we're living the life. And I don't remember the exact words that were used, and I don't remember who it was who was like coaching us. But what I do remember is how I felt, and I felt the way I felt was like, oh my gosh, this is disgusting. They're gonna be bringing spot, making us turn into spies. It- and I'm not sure if that's really what happens. But the way I see it now is that maybe they just want members uh, to speak freely. And from what I understand is that when because I wasn't there when there were visitations, because I've moved around quite a bit. And I remember, being told by other members that, yeah, the bishop, a bishop from this place, came and they're asking us questions. And I even remember one ex sister or brother sharing with me in that, yeah, we were asked questions because some ex members or some members were complaining during those interviews that bad things were happening, and a certain superior told us that we needed to protect the group. And so I asked this person, so what'd you do? Did you tell the truth and say, yeah, those bad things were happening? She's like, then this person's like, absolutely not. I was telling them what I was pretty much coached to say. Now I'm trying to not make the person's identity known, so I'm just trying to be very vague in details. But this is the mentality that we had, because it's like, hey, these are the people who are persecuting us. And and the way I saw it was that we kind of had a right to lie to the bishops, because you don't trust them. I mean, like I said, going back, they were saying that they might have spies, and then later on, I heard from some members that during the interviews, some were speaking up, and others were like protecting the group, the institute, because there is this mentality that this group is established by God, that you have to protect it, and that there's nothing wrong with lying. So it was very, very confusing. But let's look at Canon 628, where it says, yeah, it's the right and duty of a bishop to visit. But I want to focus more on section 3, and I'm actually going to straight up quote it entirely. And it says here, members, Canon 628, Section 3, members are to act with trust towards a visitator, to whose legitimate questioning they are bound to respond according to the truth in charity. Moreover, it is not permitted for anyone in any way to divert members from this obligation, or otherwise to impede the scope of the visitation. So what is the so end of quote. But what is the goal of the visitation? So it's like these bishops and the members from the Vatican are going, and like I said earlier, we know that not everyone from the Vatican is perfect, and we know that a lot of BS happens. But in this case, in in this movement, in the Alliance of the Two Hearts, in the Two Hearts Institutes, the bishops, the visitator is going, but already so many of the members have no trust. Why? Because we've been trained not to have trust. We've been trained that they're out to persecute us, that they're out to destroy us. There's persecution delusion. And we're trained that in the highest law is the salvation of souls, which I said in the last canon law episode. The supreme law is the salvation of souls. So that was used to pretty much justify, well, if we're gonna lie, it's actually a mental reservation, and we're doing it to protect us, because they're actually persecuting us, or they want to find a reason to persecute us. And I remember at this time of the visitation, my mind was already opening up to the idea that maybe some of the things here that Father Bing is doing is actually deceitful, is actually not done in the spirit of transparency. And maybe he's not being a true shepherd. Maybe he's not being a genuine lover of souls, because they always say, hey, salvation of souls is the highest law. But I'm seeing this lack of charity, where we're trained to look at others as below us, to look at even our family members as below us, or as hexed and infested, or to look at ex members as below us, or again, as hexed and infested, when in truth, a religious institute, I believe, instead of looking down on ex members, you're supposed to see them as your brother, as your sister, as your family, or even bishops and priests. You're supposed to look at them with charity and kindness. And the way that this movement became culty was by having this holier than thou and this us versus them mentality. So going back to section 3 of 628, I was saying how there has to be, no, there has to be this trust, but that no one should really impede a member from being open and to have this trust, especially during a visitation. But I remember one of the priests, he was sharing with us, I think it was in Dover, Delaware. And I remember which priest it was. It wasn't Father Bing, it wasn't Father John, but it was another priest who was high up there in the Philippines. And he was, sharing to us about the visitation that was happening. And I remember a specific word that he was complaining about. And he mentioned the word scrutinize. They are scrutinizing us. Can you believe it? And it was pretty much a rant on how, they're out to destroy us, and how they're out to tear us down. And I was thinking in the back of my head, well, I mean, why are we bothered by that? I mean, we're supposed to be Catholic. We're supposed to be transparent. We're supposed to be, future good priests. Shouldn't there be this transparency? Shouldn't there be this openness to for scrutiny? If there's nothing to worry about, then go ahead and scrutinize it. Go ahead and, check it up and see that we're living our life properly. But if there is this fear of being scrutinized, and I'm starting to think, what's going on? Are we really that holy group that Father Bing and the rest of the leaders were telling us? Or is something more sinister happening? And so little by little, I started seeing the separation of this culty mentality where it's like we are the salvation of the church. We are the true hope of the church. And then you see these other members who just want to live a good Catholic religious life. And so that, to give some perspective for for the listeners, my goal, especially in this episode, is to really share with you how not everything there was bad. There were some good things that we did, but it was just disturbing seeing how we were put in a position where we joined wanting to do good things, wanting to do acts of charity, and then how that was really hijacked, and how we had this fear of even being transparent with the bishops because, like, oh my gosh, they're out to get us. But I'm going to end it there. And I want to give a little heads up because on my YouTube, someone commented on my last video regarding canon law, which I posted there, and a person asked if I can talk about the sacrament of confession. I don't remember the exact wording of the question, but it was about like that seal of confession, of that confessor penitent confidentiality. And I'm going to be diving into that because that was actually a good question. But the way I'm going to try to, you know dive into it is by shedding light on how the group really abused confession in a way, and also to give my give my thoughts on that question because I think it's regarding Jehovah Witnesses and how they also use that. I think I'm gonna have to really look at that question, but how sometimes how abusers can really get away with things, with abuse, and how abuses are repeated over and over again, and it seems like nothing is happening to the abuser. So that was a good question. It's not going to be easy for me to answer, but I think that together we can get into it and check it out. And that is it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Uh, Soon, I'll also be dropping in an episode with author Michael Losh. He has written the book Mentally Diseased. So you can check out that episode coming out soon on my YouTube and on Spotify, on Apple, and on all major podcast platforms. That'll be out next Friday. But if you want early access, you can check out my Patreon. I will be posting that interview a lot sooner. So that's it for today. Thank you very much. And feel free to reach out, hit me up. My email is truththehealspodcast at gmail.com. I am your host, Ryan Anthony Hernandez, and you have been listening to the Truth That Heals podcast.